Coming off the heels of Fate Extra CCC, Fate Extella the Umbral Star has a bit of a challenge ahead of itself. There's a lot to live up to. Extra CCC really does continue a lot of thematic and gameplay elements from Extra, and it really kind of ties them up in a neat bow. As a writer, I would not envy the position that Nasu and the other people in the Type Moon writers room were kind of put in trying to create a follow-up. Now, I'll admit, this is not my first go-around at Extella the Umbral Star. Years ago, I started the game on the Nintendo Switch, but for one reason or another, probably because I never played the original Fate Extra at that time, the story didn't click with me, and I'll be honest, the gameplay definitely didn't click with me. So I always kind of knew going into Extella the Umbral Star, it would have been one of the easiest games for me to start streaming with on the channel. But that's kind of why I started the original Extra, actually. Because I knew I was never going to appreciate Umbral Star if I didn't give myself that context first. So this is kind of my attempt at getting another look at this game, giving it another chance. See if there's something that maybe I just missed by not actually reading Extra first. First, I kind of want to look at the gameplay here. Fate Extella the Umbral Star does away with that rock, paper, scissors gameplay that the original Fate Extra and Extra CCC used. Instead, we're adopting a system much closer to the Dynasty Warriors series. It's Muso is the Japanese term for this type of gameplay style. In many ways, this is more of a Warriors game than the actual crossover with the Warriors franchise, Samurai Remnant, which is developed by T.H.E.'s Warriors team and runs on the Warriors engine. This game plays significantly more like your traditional Muso game. If you've played a Muso game before, this explanation on the gameplay is going to sound remarkably similar to you, most likely. You've got control of 1 to 2 servants per map, where it's split between control by your forces or the enemy force. Both sides are populated with generic-looking enemies that you mow down by the thousands, and servant generals who are mostly useless at doing anything other than being an HP sponge. Your goal is to capture bases until you have control over enough of them to call in the boss, or at least finish up the mandatory events of that story section. Once you've managed to complete the requirements of the map, the boss is spawned in, or a teleporter to the boss is spawned in. Either way, you beat the boss, end the level, rinse and repeat multiple times, until eventually you get the credits to roll. And then in this game in particular, you rinse and repeat that multiple times too, because there are multiple routes to this game. Yeah, though, this is 100% a Muso. A few things make it a little different from your traditional Muso fare, at least the ones I've played. There are Musos developed in studio by Marvelous that I've never played before. I believe it's the Senran Kagura series. Those might be a little bit closer to what we're seeing here, but my point of comparison right now are with the Koei Tecmo Musos, the Warriors games and their various spin-offs and crossovers. And there are definitely some differences. For one, even for a Muso, this one feels cheap. There's minimal enemy variety, and the program looks making every map kind of feel samey and procedural in a way. The maps are also not very openly designed, instead being just a series of rooms connected by teleporters. Enemy generals don't move physically. Instead, they and the invading force will stand still in a room while a meter pointing in the direction of the room they're going to fills up. And then once that fills up, they all teleport. In the end, it comes together to feel a little bit lesser than the Muso fare even I'm familiar with, in both a gameplay and a graphical sense. Not to mention the balance. Muso games are not known for their difficulty. Usually difficulty comes from completing alternate objectives and achieving a higher ranking on your map. But what difficulty is in a Muso game tends to come from moment-to-moment strategy. Instead of simple combat proficiency. The tactics here, though, are kind of non-existent. So long as you stop the invading forces and manage to juggle between them pretty well, you'll always beat the map, and usually it's pretty easy from there to get the highest possible rank. Against all logic, the game actually doesn't get harder as time goes on. It gets remarkably easier. I think a large part of the difficulty that you're going to find in this game, whether you're playing the main story or some of the side stories, is going to come from your initial servant feeling underleveled, too far underleveled to feel comfortable playing, to clear a room quickly, meaning that those invading forces just move too fast for you to be able to stop. It really leads to the start of most routes and even a lot of the side stories to feeling very overwhelming when you're supposed to be getting your bearings on the game. And especially those early maps can feel just touchy moment to moment. Like, if you are not immediately locked in, already knowing what the game wants you to do, you just lose. Like, you can't win. You'll, in a blink of an eye, the map will already be over. But by the end of any given story, it's not only not difficult, it nears brain dead. And just because the story ramps up so much, it leads to this heavy feeling of gameplay story dissonance. This is very disappointing because once you actually get good, the game gets very, very samey. Occasionally, the game will introduce new mechanics to try mixing things up, but these feel woefully underbaked and underutilized. Neutral territories, for example, seem like a very promising mechanic for keeping things open and potentially, dare I say, customizable in your approach to a given map. But I could be wrong here. I don't think they appeared ever again after the initial map they were introduced in, besides the replays you occasionally do on some of the side stories. If the neutral territories were actually in other levels in the game, they stuck around for such a pitiful amount of time that I would hesitate to even call them a mechanic. Even the bosses are themselves kind of a disappointment. Most of them amount to you just smacking an enemy servant till they die. Musos aren't exactly known for their combat depth, not in the way where it works in a one-on-one fight. So servant fights really don't amount to much other than hit, hit, hit. Oh, they're shielding. Stop for a minute. They're done shielding. Hit them again. And there is one pretty damn neat boss fight. But even that one is ruined because you fight it 3 times. Fucking 3 times. You fight the same exact boss. It's at the end of every single route except for the final route. You even fight it again in the side stories at one point. It's completely unchanged too. They don't do it, they just copy pasted it between routes. And then for the final boss, the final boss of the entire game, of the final route, the golden route, it is a complete joke of a boss. Its only difficulty comes from these pseudo Star Fox segments that feel out of place as all hell when you're playing it. I wish I had a lot positive to say about the gameplay, but the most positive thing I can say is that it feels less awful to play the more you get used to it. That's not a compliment. Even for a Muso game, this is a very, very lacking gameplay system. But of course, we're not here for the gameplay. Most Type Moon fans are not here for the gameplay. We're here for the story, so just without getting fully into the weeds of spoilers, let me give my thoughts on the story here. The story is good. That's the short of it. The story is good. It's split up into 4 parts. One focused on each of the game's heroines, Nero, Tamamo, and Altera. And then there's a final golden route which sort of wraps up the overarching story that takes place in all 3 of the heroine stories. The Tamamo and Altera routes in particular are both fantastic. They feel like proper continuations of the characters and themes from Extra and CCC. And the golden route is alright as a story. It's got some distinct highs for sure. But unfortunately, Nero's route and I'd even say the vast majority of the Golden Route, are kind of mediocre. The game seems wholly unsure about what to do with Nero as a character, so any part that highlights her just struggle to grip me at all. Oddly, our mute protagonist Hakuno does a whole lot more legwork than Nero does in her own story. Which, genuinely, that's kind of disappointing. This game is one you would primarily be playing for the story, and while there's some really good stuff here, it's a hard one to recommend unless you're already familiar with many of the characters from Extra and CCC. As a standalone, I can't in good consciousness place this on the same level as CCC or even the original Extra. But I won't take away from this game too much. The highs are truly highs. Like, many parts are as good, if not better, than some of the stuff in CCC. This game just has a hard time getting to those quickly and putting a bow on it. But that's probably enough beating around the bush. Let's really get into the weeds of my thoughts on the individual routes in much more spoilery depth. Flame Poem is honestly very, very simple. A little disappointingly so, next to what came before it with CCC or even with the original Extra. Maybe the lowered runtime affects my thoughts here, but it didn't feel like Nero had much of an arc, or anyone had much of an arc here, to be honest. Every one of the characters here feels static and trope-ridden, other than Altera. The story opens with a conflict with Bathory, which just feels so underbaked compared to her arc in CCC. Suddenly she's back and terrorizing people and demanding the world. And like, okay, it's fine, this is a different Bathory, but it's a bit disappointing to retread the same character that had been around way too often for her own good in CCC. Then, when Tamamo gets properly introduced, it gets a bit silly. The entire middle two levels are basically just a bitch-off between Nero and Tamamo over who gets to keep their precious waifu or husbando. And it's a very shallow conflict for what's the first time I'm seeing these characters interact on an official, like, serious capacity from the Extraverse. Things do get significantly better for Altera's arc of Flame Poem, but even that is rather simple, being summed up as just Altera is the bringer of destruction, and Nero needs to stop it. Some of their interactions do hold a lot more weight than Nero and Tamamo's interactions did. Like, it's actually a bit striking how Nero is able to throw Tamamo off due to the most mundane, offhanded comment. The simple trash talk of, "go look in a mirror," gets Altera to seriously consider her own humanity. And her connection with the body of Hakuno is kind of touching, even if we've yet to see into the mind of the Hakuno body. That's right. I almost forgot to mention, Hakuno is split into 3 parts here. I previously mentioned the battle between Nero and Tamamo over who gets to have their husband or waifu, but that's because the husbando or waifu is split into 3 pieces: the mind, the body, and the soul. The mind and the soul are with Nero and Tamamo. The body is with Altera. So we've got 3 Hakunos. They don't really interact too much for most of the game, so you don't really have to think about it too hard. It's mostly going to be a function of how this story is going to put weight onto Hakuno's actions. Archimedes does make a decent showing here, though. You can peg him from a mile away as the big bad of this story, but the fact that he more or less accomplishes his goal, and only reason he doesn't sort of sit on his laurels is because it's just not enough, and he moves to another timeline. Really, that entire situation with him makes him a kind of fun villain, not just in Nero's story, but the rest of the story in general. He's got the rare continuous arc between arcs, so with luck, we're going to see more of him fleshed out as we move into the other 2 arcs as well. The final boss, Sefer Altera, is actually pretty cool, at least in this first playthrough for the first route. We'll get into... I harped enough in the gameplay section that fighting her 3 times was not worth it. But this first time, it's a neat, just really neat change in pace. What kind of fucked me over is the PC port's a little jank. Now, for those watching live, you know that part of it was my own fault. I connected the wrong display port to the wrong cable in my PC, so it was a little bit, like, a lot of the lag was on me. But the PC port definitely feels a little awkward to play. The quality of the PC port is not up to what you'd probably... Even as I say this, the final boss of the route is still somewhat easy compared to even the rest of the game. I'm not saying I needed it to be that difficult, but a little challenge might have been nice. Yeah, this was just better in every way compared to the Nero arc. Let me back up here. Nero's arc often felt like it was as deep as a puddle. Altera was a cool concept and the ending was hard-hitting. But otherwise it felt simple, and in many ways that set my expectations for the Tamamo arc very low. Come to the Tamamo arc and, oh, what do you know? It has actually written characters. Who'd have thought? What a concept. The big two standout characters here are Tamamo no Mae and Elizabeth Bathory, actually. Tamamo's arc feels like it picks up right where her servant ending left off. We have a Tamamo with all of her tails, as she did when she rescued Hakuno from the Moon Cell at the end of CCC. Except she hasn't cut them off yet and sent him to the void. It's to the point where she will literally directly reference Kat and Vitch as part of herself. Her personality is noticeably crueler, and often it feels like we are playing the bad guys, as Tamamo selfishly tries to hold everything to herself, and this damn nearly costs her everything. Amongst those bad acts is a mistreatment of Liz, who, despite how things looked in the Nero arc, is directly continuing from CCC, downright trying to make amends for it. She realizes that Hakuno is in danger being around Tamamo, and tries to help them escape. It never comes to pass though, and she spends the majority of the arc watching out for Hakuno, as it's revealed that Tamamo doesn't just want to be the wife of Hakuno, but may even want to consume them in one way or another. I'm going to choose to believe that for Foxwife, this means something more metaphorically than anything. That maybe she wasn't literally trying to eat Hakuno alive. But, Liz was kinda right about her, though. And her constant abuse by Tamamo, and seeming lack of ability to make a change, leads her to Archimedes, who's still trying to manipulate the world and the timeline for his victory. He and Liz conspire to take the regalia from Tamamo, with Liz wanting to be the heroine that gets to save Hakuno. Liz, however, loses herself to a dragon's influence and eats a regalia, causing her to become what I can only describe as Dark Liz, or Dark Eliza as she'll call herself. Kind of a Liz alter. Liz suddenly becomes as deep into the Umbral Star plot as Archimedes is, rocking a similar corruption, and the two bait Tamamo into fighting Altera, whom is defeated handily, leading to the White Titan coming out. It's here where Tamamo spills the beans about letting her more Daji side out, to try pushing Hakuno away. The two reaffirm their love for one another and defeat Sepher, living happily ever after in their timeline, at least until the Umbral Star can arrive. Archimedes and Liz escape together to the next timeline due to their failure here. The ending is much less a downer than Nero's, because in Nero's, Hakuno literally falls into an eternal sleep and the timeline gets pruned. But really, this arc more than Nero feels like a continuation of what came before, an elaboration of the stories of both Liz and Tamamo. I just enjoyed it a hell of a lot more, though. But that could be some Tamamo bias leaking. I never did directly read the Nero route myself. I've experienced it via adaptations and via just being familiar with Nero's character, but maybe there's an element I'm missing there. Feel free to let me know in the comments section if a Flame poem was a lot more meaningful for you. Then there's the Dawn arc, and oh my god, this arc is something else. Longtime viewers of the channel may know that our history with Altera is a bit rocky. Correct that. Seki's history with Altera is a bit rocky. But I am not Seki. Altera is a really well-handled character. This arc, far and away, is the best arc up to this point, as it is able to balance not only its main heroine and side cast as have with character development, but even Hakuno gets to be a real, tangible character, getting her own development here that feels like a defining moment for their character just as a whole. Something I really can't say confidently about Hakuno in the previous 2 arcs, because in the previous 2 arcs, Hakuno mostly acts as a vehicle for the respective heroines, never having their own real development. This story, in some ways, is the culmination of Hakuno and Gilgamesh's arc, actually. It's genuinely no coincidence that arguably the 3rd most important character of this arc is Gilgamesh, who seems to hold on to an affection for Hakuno that Hakuno doesn't remember. Perhaps he may even have memories of CCC, once again bringing in CCC's odd multiversal loop shenanigans into the play of this story. But the core of this arc is Altera and her desire for freedom. Altera is bound to the Umbral Star and is in service of it to destroy the world, despite having fallen in love with memories she has of roaming the plains free as Attila the Hun. She desires to return to Earth, and in more ways than one, walk as a free person and experience just that full sense of freedom again for herself. But it is an impossible dream, as her duty is to destroy the world, and even the moon, which offers her digital refuge at the moment. A process which will even kill herself. Enter Hakuno and Archimedes, whom has been sliding through timelines again and again at this point. The two enter to take out the White Titan, but Hakuno has a moment of hesitation that causes them to be scooped up by Altera, who, out of curiosity, spooks Hakuno into thinking they're about to die. Hakuno, to avoid just losing everything by being crushed to death in Altera's hands, splits herself off into the mind, the body, and the soul, which we saw how that played out in the previous arcs, where it leads to the battle between Nero and Tamamo. But the body remains with Altera throughout this entire story. Begin the Stockholm Syndrome arc. Okay, it's not that bad, but Altera in no uncertain terms is holding Hakuno captive, and even forces Hakuno to join her in battle in order to fight the top servants that the Moon Cell sends to subdue her. In order to do this, Altera the Giant creates a terminal version of herself to fight as a servant. It's from here that Hakuno is fully tricked into contracting with her. For their first opponent, it's Iskandar, then second, it's Jean. But just as it seems like Hakuno is going to watch and just wither away while Altera takes control of the moon, their relationship is saved by the sudden arrival of Gilgamesh. Here he acts like he is simply testing Altera's resolve, as he owes her a favor. We'll find out much later that Gilgamesh here was genuinely trying to help take out Altera to save Hakuno, but later we'll find out that Gilgamesh was genuinely trying to take out Altera to save Hakuno, but stops when he sees Hakuno begin helping Altera with code casts. Gilgamesh reins in Jean and Iskandar, and then joins Altera, leading an unlikely alliance against the rest of the moon. Altera and Hakuno return to the giant Altera's lair, and that's when Hakuno starts trying to bond with Altera in her giant state, leading the two of them to develop actual feelings for each other. Hakuno at this point begins trying to decide how to move forward without abandoning Altera. This is where things get a bit complicated. Tamamo steps in and tries to retake Hakuno's body, and after a couple battles, we're forced to watch Altera strike down Tamamo, whom this Hakuno may not remember, but feels an instinctual pain at her death. Despite the pain, she resolves herself to save Altera above all else. Nero's arc in this story comes next. Hakuno and Altera engage Nero's forces and are ambushed by Nero, who tries to genuinely open real communications out of trust for her praetor's judgment. But despite the fact that both Hakunos that are present wish to try pushing for negotiations, things really go south when Altera just lashes out, leading them to an all-out war. Altera is told off by Hakuno, which is not great when Titan Altera is simultaneously being lambasted by a still evil from Tamamo's route, Liz. That night, Altera locks Hakuno up once again and forces her to sit out on the remaining fights, going in alone. But she walks right into a trap, leading her to have to rush back to her own base because Nero has already made it to the body of Hakuno, but didn't take them immediately, instead challenging Altera to a duel. It doesn't really go Nero's way though, leading Altera to claim total victory. All looks well, but Archimedes is still kind of a fucking bastard. Altera defies his orders to destroy the moon and the regalia, but unfortunately, Archimedes has Hakuno prisoner. Until good old Gilgamesh arrives and beats Archimedes down long enough for Altera to recover Hakuno and give him a good ass whooping. He decides to flee the timeline again, but not before trying to wipe his hands clean. So he, like every other route, forces Titan Altera to transform into Zephyr, which forces the Altera terminal and Hakuno to put her down. Altera's terminal then has a teary goodbye with Hakuno, as you can't have the terminal around for very long after the main body is destroyed. The only thing Hakuno is left with is her very life, as she is finally whole again. A life that Hakuno quickly decides to cash in. They search the Moon Cell database and discover that they can secretly slip between timelines, but realize they can only send their memories through as they are now. So they sacrifice their own body to send their memories off to the past in one final gambit to save Altera and the world. This arc's conclusion is solidly one of the best moments in the entire Extra series. This is the long built-up acceptance of death that Hakuno has to go through. Across every Extra game, Hakuno is a character who has to tackle their own mortality. In one way or another, at least. Their erasure in the original Fate Extra was unavoidable and not in their control, and in CCC, despite being ready for death, they always get to survive. But here, finally, in Extella's Dawn arc, Hakuno not only dies to save Altera, but does so fully willingly when they did not have to. The moment feels like a culmination of Hakuno's journey so far, and it's no wonder Gilgamesh wanted to be so involved in the route, since he was watching Hakuno for their own responses to mortality within CCC, knowing that they would be willing to do something extraordinary. For Hakuno to choose death to save others finally feels like the payoff to Hakuno's arc since the beginning. You remember in my CCC route, I compared Hakuno to Kiara as the saviors of those around them. Kiara saves others for her own selfish purposes, but Hakuno saves others not for their own sake, but for the sake of the ones they are saving. Ultimately, this all leads us to the Golden Poem arc, where you now have Archimedes, Liz, and Hakuno all time slipping. The Golden Poem arc is complicated. In many ways, it continues the highs of the previous arcs. Character arcs that prove strong there see remarkably well done conclusions. Mostly, I think the start of the route is particularly very strong. Hakuno waking up with vague memories of the previous arc and having a complete badass moment of putting Archimedes in his place immediately was genuinely great and set the tone for the route very well. It's actually kind of wonderful that Hakuno and Nero have to start the unfortunate task of dealing with the threat while not killing it. It makes for good stakes for this route and really creates a conflict that feels ever present throughout the entire thing. The fact that anime characters use their words for once and you don't actually have to fight Tamamo at the end of her portion of this route was actually a pleasant surprise. Actually, the boss fight that follows is incredibly fun as you have Tamamo and Nero fighting Altera side by side in a moment that feels earned after the conflict of the two across their own routes. And with Tamamo thoroughly negotiated with, we begin the final stretch of the route. And here's where the first problem starts to come in. Tamamo. Poor Tamamo. For being the second of 3 heroines of this game, she really gets the short end of the stick here. Despite her joining your side, being such a momentous occasion in this route, she kinda just fucks off for the rest of it. It is a genuinely missed opportunity on a gameplay and story level to not give her more to do in Altera's stretch. While it's a fine conclusion to her arc to have her join forces with Nero, it never feels like it's any different after that, beyond just more characters chiming in during the meeting room scenes. I guess what's also disappointing is the lack of any real meaningful contributions from the side cast of really either side of this conflict of Nero and Tamamo. Tamamo and Nero's side cast continues to have nothing really to contribute. But Altera's side cast in particular are given hints that they have more to do in Altera's sections, but just end up contributing nothing by the end. It's not the biggest problem, but it could have been better. And then the final stretch is such a whiplash in quality. There's some great, and I mean truly spectacular moments. Particularly, the Hakuno Body's final scene is actually kind of heartbreaking, but solidified that full circle nature of Hakuno's arc like from the previous story. This is a Hakuno that saw it all and knew she was going to die, but instead of looking for a way out, like Fate Extra Hakuno spends the majority of their game doing, this Hakuno accepts that and just appreciates the time that they have left with Altera. Her goodbye had me on the edge of tears, because you could feel the pain Altera is going through in that moment, having finally accepted her own life thanks to seeing the beauty of the world, just to lose the one who worked so hard for her to see it. But the resulting beatdown of Archimedes is actually really satisfying. Knocking his teeth in just feels really good. And after that, the bastard tries to summon the Ark of the Stars to attack the moon. But then you get to see the giant Altera appear to stop it, and it feels like a wonderful conclusion to Altera's arc of joining with humanity. And this is where I need to complain again. For how good this stretch of events was, you know whose name I've neglected to mention in a long while? Yeah, Nero. The main heroine of this route, now on try 2 of having a story, has once again been largely neglected here, which is really painful after her route was arguably the weakest in the entire game. And I hate to say it, but she's kind of annoying in all of this. Don't get me wrong, she has her moments, but it almost feels like Nasser or whoever wrote the section tried way too hard to make her inspiring. She starts throwing around all sorts of buzzwords about love and friendship that seem to be trying to hammer themes home, but instead, it starts to make the entire thing feel like a Saturday morning cartoon. And she spends most of the route acting like this. So when she transforms into this new form called Saber Venus and has a remarkably anticlimactic final boss fight, it really feels unearned, as the transformation doesn't represent a change in her character, but rather it's just a form to take on for the final boss. Nero is truly rough, because she is a horrifically static character here, both in this route and the game as a whole. She starts the game as a charismatic leader with an eye for the extravagant, and ends it the same exact way. In her route, only her tragic ending actually does anything to take her character in any direction, and it only does that by giving her what could be an interesting plot beat of a vegetative master. But that goes nowhere. We never follow up on that. That ending and Nero resets for the final route. Her working with Tamamo is not that impressive, because she's always been the most diplomatic of the 3 heroines. Tamamo gets to live in Nero's route as well, and Nero already tries to make efforts to spare Altera in both her route and Altera's route. So there is no question about whether she wants to save Altera. She starts and ends the route in exactly the same spot, except now she is fighting with Tamamo over Hakuno. Tamamo isn't static, Altera isn't static, so it baffles me that Nero has to be. It's like Nero was played by The Rock. The story, for its willingness to show darker sides to all of its characters, seems scared to portray Nero as anything but the charismatic main character. And the ending's alright, I guess. Nero is amazing and saved a portion of the Titan Altera, creating Altera larva. Altera gets to grow up as a proper living being and not as a tool to destroy worlds as a conqueror. Everyone shares a meal, and somehow Liz and Archimedes have returned. Lots of sequel bait for a sequel that never came. I'm left kind of disappointed, if I'm honest. The finale was good, but after the steady increase in quality across the entire game, I'd hoped the story would have a truly satisfying conclusion. But in the end, the best I can say about it is that the story was fine, I guess. Fate Extella thematically is surprisingly rich, carrying on a lot of continued ideas from previous entries. For Tamamo, that comment I made in the CCC video about how old habits die hard and that she had still yet to properly confront her darker tendencies, that aged really well. Since Extella seems to depict her actual confrontation with them. Where CCC was her and Hakuno coming to recognize and accept them, this was on Tamamo realizing that she can't freely slip into them without eventually risking losing the one that loves her despite them. I'll even say Nero's fears of dying alone are addressed here, in her being left alone when Hakuno goes full vegetable in her route. Even if that goes nowhere, it's still a moment that plays into Nero's existing story theming. Liz's backslide is also an element that pairs really well with CCC. It doesn't come from a place of ill intent, but rather her backslide occurred out of an attempt to make up for her past. It's the actions of Tamamo and the complacency of Hakuno that pushes her away into the manipulative arms of Archimedes, who is just there to pick her up. Strip away the comedy, and it's actually kind of a sad outcome for the poor dragon girl. And that moves me on to the game's primary theme. A theme of second chances. Static-ass Nero notwithstanding, this game's themes all surround the character of Altera, who not only caused the near end of the world before, but is actively working towards it again. Hang on. This is familiar. Actually, it should be familiar. It was the theme of CCC as well. And in lots of ways, Extella is a continuation of the themes of CCC, without resorting to nearly the amount of horny that CCC had. Though there is a little. There is a little. If I could pinpoint a theme that Extella brings to the table uniquely from other entries, it's that one's time in the world is limited. But what matters most in that time is spending it with the people you love instead of chasing unattainable goals or trying to live up to others' expectations. Nero loses that time with Hakuno due to her being caught up in conflict with Tamamo no Mae and Altera, leading to her running out of time with Hakuno before it ever really felt like it began. Tamamo's backside in her route was of a fear of the end, that she didn't want to be around when Hakuno died, and would rather scare them away because she was already used to losing people in that way. And Altera lost sight of that, giving up on her own ability to spend her own time left with the person she cared about, to try easing the pain in the end. And yet, by the end, the body of Hakuno knew she was going to die, and instead of trying to run from it, she calmly accepted that all she could do was spend her remaining time with Altera. In many ways, that idea is the answer to the question of Hakuno's own mortality that we've been following since the original Fate Extra. Fate Extella the Umbral Star is an interesting game. Weaker gameplay and uneven story make it hard to recommend except to existing fans of Fate Extra, of which I imagine there are increasingly few due to the lack of accessibility of both the original and CCC. Let me remind you that this is, as of now, the most accessible entry in the sub-franchise, and it's not very welcoming to newbies. On a gameplay level, there's just no reason to play this over better Muso titles, unless you really want to play a game with the Fate characters specifically. It's a little bit out of the wheelhouse of the original Extra's turn-based gameplay. I and many others likely struggled adapting to this. This isn't a shit on the game. There's something here. Definitely a heart of the game worth praising in the better routes. But as of now, I can easily call this the weakest entry in the Extra game series. I'm not disappointed that I played this game. I wouldn't take it back at all. If nothing else but for better gameplay, I was really looking forward to playing Extella Link, which is supposed to refine the systems, and I guess that would be kind of our next big stop. This part is a little complicated. I had a very heartfelt ending for this video written up, and it all reads a little bit hollow now, because I'm not finishing Extella Link, not in a completionist sense anyway, before this video goes up. In fact, there's a good chance I don't complete all of the routes of Extella Link anytime soon. And peeling back the curtain here, this video is being recorded after my second Extella Link stream of 3 for this marathon that's going up on the channels. And if I can be quite honest, it's rough. I'm going to be doing the Extella Link portion of this video wholly unscripted. Extella Link is not getting its own separate video. It's getting a section of Umbral Stars video. The big reason I'm not giving more coverage to Extella Link is because someone doesn't want me to give more coverage to it. For one reason or another, copyright is draconian on Extella Link years after its release. And it's draconian in a way that it's not only is it rough to find workarounds for, it's tiring to work around. If you've been watching Seki Reacts, at this point you're pretty well familiar that Seki Reacts always has to skip the Extella Link gameplay, because a good amount of Extella Link gameplay footage was getting us copyright claimed. And when Marvelous, I'm pretty sure it's Marvelous who's putting out these claims, when they claim Extella Link, they block the video from being shown. Like, it's not just that we're not getting funding on the video. If it were just a copyright claim where they took funding from the video, fine, whatever. I'm not in this for the money. But they were taking the video down, with our only option being to cut out a chunk of the video. And it's not an easy cut either, especially when we're talking me posting 2 to 3 hour streams every week. I finally got stream 2 up because you have to go into every individual claim, of which they claimed 4 sections, and not even 4 sections. These sections were like split, so every time a cutscene played in the game, copyright claim. And they wouldn't claim it once, they would claim multiple sections, so you have to address each one of them one by one. This is a problem for multiple reasons for content creators. Say I wanted to fight this, and I did try to dispute this a little bit. You have to put in disputes for each individual claim they make. So if they made 4 claims, even if one of those claims already claimed like 8 or 9 different sets of cutscenes, well, you have to dispute all 4 of those claims. And for disputes, this isn't that big a deal. You just send the dispute and you wait to hear back, and it goes to the copyright holder, who is given a week to respond. It did not take a week for them to respond, and this is part of what made me so salty. This is not a passive, it's just not a passive, they have these systems set up with YouTube and have no way around them. No, because they get back to you remarkably quickly with these disputes. You dispute it on the rights of fair use for gameplay, less than a day later, denied. They did not agree with the fair use thing. Okay. So how about I appeal the dispute, which goes to YouTube? Well, the funny thing about appeals on content creators is if you do an appeal, and if YouTube finds that that appeal is not granted, unfortunately, what that results in is you get a copyright strike for a flagrant appeal. I'm pretty confident what I did falls under fair use, that a stream VOD falls under fair use. But the reason I'm not taking that chance is because they didn't do one strike, or claim, I mean. They did 4 individual claims on the video. What that means is either I have to send the video's appeal, or send the dispute for appeal, all 4 at once, which risks getting me 4 copyright strikes, a channel termination, and a ban from YouTube for life. Or I send them one by one, which YouTube definitely isn't getting back to you immediately on that. YouTube will take their sweet ass time getting back to you on each individual one. There's no way in hell I would send more than one at once because of the copyright strike system. So unless I wanted this video to basically be stuck in copyright limbo for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on if I did 2 appeals at once or 1 appeal at once, well, my only option is to just obey what the copyright holder, what Marvelous, is asking for, which is cut the sections out of the video, cut every single cutscene out of Fate Extella past chapter 2. Which, it's shitty. It's shitty. It really is shitty. And if it were just that, I actually probably would just continue with Extella. Sure, now that I know that they're not going to copyright, I might even have continued it to YouTube. Maybe. Probably not, because I can actually... If we get claimed in the middle of a YouTube video and they take down the... Or in the middle of a YouTube stream and they take down the stream, that actually kills our ability to stream until that claim is resolved, I'm pretty sure. And I think I've seen it happen with a Studio Omega, I'm pretty sure, where they lost their streaming rights for like 6 months or something stupid like that because of their stream. That's why the Twitch channel had to exist in the first place, because I remember that happening to them. So if it were just that I had to snip one section out, I might have continued it. But I had to snip out all 4 sections individually, and when you snip a section out, it takes an hour for the video to reprocess. So either I have to take what will amount to like 4 to 6 hours out of my day, or 4 to like continually go back over the course of like half a week to get this video up every single time I stream this game, or I just stop streaming the game and re-uploading it to YouTube. So that's why Extella Link is sort of being cut short. Because I'm willing to do that one more time for the finale of the route I'm playing. But doing this 2 or 3 more times, minimum, to get the other routes in there, it's just not worth it anymore. It really isn't. So, I'm really sorry if you're a fan of Extella Link, a fan of Charlemagne, or the Paladins of Charlemagne. I absolutely love to give more coverage to this game, but I can't. It's not worth it for me. And the amount of, like, the ordeals I have to go through to get even one stream onto YouTube, and the amount that I'm losing for what's ultimately not growing our channel, not engaging with the majority of our audience, because the majority of you aren't going to be on the Twitch streams, and not really making us any profit, like any revenue, channel revenue. We're not growing our subscriber base at all. It's really doing nothing for us. So continuing it with this amount of effort is just pointless. It's pointless. I can't bring myself to do it when I can move on to better things. And it's especially painful because, I'm going to be honest, I've been reading Extella Link's story, and it's not terrible. I went in expecting it to be kind of terrible, and it's not. But the writing quality on Extella Link really isn't any better than your average mediocre, like, FGO event. So I don't know why Marvelous is so protective of this story. Like, it's like, they're as protective here as Atlas was with Persona 5. This is not a story that you can really spoil for others. Like, it takes only a few hours to get into the big spoiler of the game. Everything else is kind of downhill from there, and most of it's just to bait out servant interactions, fun servant interactions. It's just a shame, because you know what the problem is? I genuinely enjoyed playing Extella Link. Extella Link is genuinely a fun game to play. It takes all of what Umbral Star was trying to do with the Muso format and makes a version of itself that's actually satisfying. Does not feel as moment to moment. I feel like I can try different things and not immediately go after objectives and not immediately be screwed over gameplay wise. It's got an interesting map, like story mechanic, where you get to pick the route you go down and choose your next level, which plays into which story route you end up on. It's kind of fun, actually, just on a gameplay level. It's very fun, and there's even stuff in it where I'm like, oh wow, that's Samurai Remnant that this game is. It's literally a lot of stuff Samurai Remnant does pulls from this game, like having a separate set of specials that charge over time that you use from, that are more like anime attacks and not just Muso combos, like those big like flashy like moments where the servants in the fight start smacking the shit out of each other as you rapidly mash a button or two. That is also from Extella Link. And it's like as good as I think you could get the Muso gameplay from Extella Umbral Star to be. I was genuinely enjoying it, and I probably would have a lot to say about like the ways in which this feeds into Samurai Remnant, but I don't have time to play it on my own time. Not really, not with the games that I'm enjoying a lot more, that are a little bit more in my wheelhouse, that I play on my personal time. Not next to channel stuff I have to do. And then if I can't fit it in the stream lineup as a bonus stream, because I still want to be able to interact with you guys on the main YouTube channel weekly, I'm left in a really, really awkward place as far as Extella Link goes. That's why this is the finale to both the Extella Link streams and the finale to the Extella Umbral Star streams, why it's at the end of both playlists. Because I can say Extella Link is a gameplay improvement. The story's okay. But as a content creator, they don't want me doing anything with this game. And if they don't want me doing anything with this game, I won't do anything with this game. That's really the end of the story. And it feels awful to end it here, because as of now, this is the end of the Extella, or not the Extella, the Extra franchise. This is the end of all of the Fate Extra games. Nothing canonical to the Fate Extra sub-franchise has released since. There is going to be a remake of Extra in Extra Record, and that's bound to be pretty fun. Hopefully it doesn't have the same copyright issues. I can't imagine it will. There's obviously the FGO Extra stuff, but brand new Extra games that move the story forward are radio silent right now, like a lot of other Type Moon franchises and entries. I really didn't want to go out on a bummer note, but I don't have much to say here. Extella Link doesn't feel good as a final story to the Extra franchise. Umbral Star was great, but left loose ends. It makes me kind of wish, as much as I love Altera's route and Altera's character, if they weren't going to have the time to tell this story in full, to wrap up what they were setting up, they shouldn't have made it. They shouldn't have. It should have ended at Extra CCC. Extra CCC was a satisfying ending to the story. Umbral Star was not. Link's story was kind of half-assed. And once again, the franchise loses out on people talking about it because of really, really, in this case, really shitty copyright enforcement. It's kind of a bummer. Well, that might be the end of the Extra video game franchise, but that's not the end of the Extra marathon. It's really going to depend on what I find time to do in the Extra marathon next, because on one hand I have CCC Foxtail, and on the other hand I have the Seraph main interlude. I'm doing both, and actually my next streams after Extella Link finishes up, in which will finish up a week from recording, but way before you see this video, should be Seraph. I might actually be done streaming Seraph by then. So that really leaves me with you'll either your next video for this marathon is either going to be Seraph or it's going to be Foxtail. Whatever it is and whatever you get next, I really hope you guys look forward to it. I'm signing off for now. I hope you all have a good one.